big kraal, but it was known by marks that these ones belong to the Dube clan, these ones belong to this one. And guys went together to herd while women did some house chores. So it's not new information, but when the industrial era came, information was switched off into introducing fertilizers, introducing pesticides to increase the harvest. And so generations of our people have learned that and now having to unlearn, which makes information on regeneration new, but it's not new. Even seed preservation was done using wood ash. We would use the soot, you know, when you burn your wood, the black stuff. So you stack all your seeds in the rooftop of your kitchen. That black stuff would protect your seeds from moth and things that burrow the seed. So we had all that. We had natural varieties, and well, now it's difficult to get the traditional ones that are not manipulated by seed companies.
So that was obviously when big ag came, there were expenses that they didn't have before, right? To buy the fertilizer and the chemicals, or whatever. They must have seen some progress initially with that, and then I'm taking it that over time that deteriorated.
So what happens is, usually when you introduce fertilizer in your field, the first year you're like, I am the man, or I am the woman, whatever. Your harvest seems to go really very big, but then the soil continues to demand more and more, and the growth of your crops dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. And one farmer, actually, where we did a field fair last year, she stopped because she used she reintroduced animals in her field before planting. She didn't need to spray her cowpeas and beans. She didn't need to spray because there was a symbiosis between the insects and the plants, and she didn't have those pests that destroyed her crop. But then when you use fertilizers over time, you have to spray quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. I see. So the demand goes up.
And sometimes with the weather instabilities as well, we have long dry spells. So you can imagine you've just applied your ammonium nitrate or compound whatever on your field, and then the rains go away. Your crops just burn immediately.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
really
then
helpful.
Pressure from the big agricultural organizations. So here's the strategy that they've done. They work through big bodies like USAID, World Food Program, and they come through the Ministry of Agriculture and introduce these big programs. We have one here called the Command Agriculture, which is actually run by the Army. And so farmers have to sort of subscribe to getting these sometimes free inputs, but they're not relevant. For example, in my region here, they've made a few farmers plant cotton, and it doesn't work. But then you're told these are cash crops. You're told the end dreamy result that you will actually make money from this. But then they are pushing in lots of seeds into otherwise unequipped farmers, and they do it through the extension officers. But in our role also as facilitators on the ground, you sort of have to build a relationship with the extension officers, because you also have your other plots where you've used your natural cropping, animal impact, and you're planting small grains like finger millet. I don't know if you know these seeds that I'm talking about, because they are more resilient, they can stand a long dry spell. And so you have to create a relationship with the on-the-ground government officials who will then help support your initiative. At the end of the day, they get good reports also back to the ministry. Otherwise, most of the crops fail that are being pushed. But then every year, seeds and fertilizers and keep coming to farmers. So that's the pressure that we have. It's almost like they've seen a fresh new ground in Africa.
So those are seeds that are developed by one company that then you have to keep buying from?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you don't have to buy from, because it will come as an enrolled program by the government through the USAID.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's almost like, you know, like aid and help, but they're really pushing it because eventually someone pays for it.
So is there corruption that's leading to that push? I mean, it seems like with big farming, you know, big ag, there's money to be had.
Yeah, of course. Like, I think the corruption is in sometimes lack of information from our governments, and then the big corporations push it to them.
Yeah.
I think just that lack of the broader context of what will make agriculture successful in Zimbabwe is not what is making it successful in the US, for example, if it's seemingly successful.
Uh-huh. Right.
Yeah.
I have my doubts too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And then,
Actually, it's the same in US. It's not that successful. The large agriculture that's producing cash crops is subsidized by the government. So it's a similar situation. You know, and a lot of the crops that are being grown by big ag are not food crops for people. They're food crops for ethanol and for feedstock, for feeding animals. So instead of using the animals in the regenerative practice to bring the soil back, they're growing corn at the huge cost of fertilizer and water, and then they feed the corn to the animals. So it's very unsustainable.
right. And so you realize that then if they didn't have subsidies, of which maybe for in a season like right now, where COVID-19 is really ravishing the stock market funds, you may find that they won't be able to sustain these sort of subsidies, but the soil cannot continue to sustain the farmer and vice versa. Okay, so there's another question. I'm curious about the role of information and communication technologies in holistic management and community facilitation. So I think because of literacy levels, we use visuals. We have different tools to relay information or get a discussion going with communities. I worked in Kenya, one organization called Northern Rangelands Trust. They started making animated videos. So what was fun there was we had 2 fears. I remember when they were rolling out, it was the week when I was there as well. We had 2 fears that the elderly in the communities, they're probably not used to animations, like because they're used to real people and they won't relate to an animated elephant. But then to our surprise, they really accepted it and it was more fun for them. But these animals and humans were communicating in the local language. And so it's not weird for an animal to actually communicate in an audible voice that I can hear in my language, because we have legends and stories that we tell of animals when they used to speak. So we relay information on regeneration using those videos. That's what they use out there. We use picture cards which are drawn in natural color, and they have to be relevant to the community that you're dealing with. I'll share a funny story. I had one picture card that we had produced to work as showing a mixed herd of animals, of livestock, going to drink water. And what we did is these animals are at the river and they are drinking. So the cattle have their hooves in the water. And then the goats also had their hooves in the water. And you know, it was a big disaster bringing that picture out, because the community members started saying, what goats are those that put their hooves in the water? Like, they don't mind the cattle because they've seen them in the water, but then goats do not get anywhere near the water. They'll push their mouths and then stay out of the mud. And so that picture card didn't communicate at all. So like, okay, so you reverse it and then you draw it appropriately and then it will work there. So it has to be contextually relevant to the communities, then they can use it as communicative information. And I think, yeah, so that's what we have used so far in lots of conversation and dramatized skits where you want to communicate something, but then you use a certain skit. I'll give an example of one skit that I used in one community when we were really stuck. Remember, I said dare to dream in my earlier presentation. So we're framing our holistic context after we had identified what is wrong with our land, how did we get here? And so now we're trying to ask ourselves questions. So what is the life that we want, which is the holistic context, others call it the holistic goal, but you're creating a broader, beautiful vision. And so community members kept saying, we don't want starving, we don't want this, we don't want, so they were stuck with what they do not want other than saying what they want. You know, saying goes, if you define well what you want, then your decisions are made in that frame of what I've spelled out as my values and my desires for my community. I quickly came up with a story and I was like, okay, let's say you're a shopkeeper, it's a small village, you have a little store. And I come into your store and I say, hey, okay, so do you have cookies in here? And then you say, yes. And I say, no, I don't want cookies. I don't want fish. I don't want water. I don't want juice. I don't want, and the shop, so I brought a guy, then we did it. It was an elderly man. He was so frustrated. He's like, what do you want from my shop? I was like, that's exactly what you guys are doing. I said, what do you want? And you're telling me what you don't want. Like, what do you do with a person when they walk into your shop and they say what they don't want, instead of saying what they've come for? Okay, so it takes a lot of creativity for you to then interact with these elders, because I think the challenge is it's easy to say, what is a holistic context? It is a context or words that we will say that will guide our decisions. And every day we make our decisions, we are living towards these. If anything does not serve what we have written in our context, we are not doing it. It's easy to explain it maybe to a class like you guys, but in a community, you break down the language to small fragments, but you still want to keep the principle the same. So you have to continuously be creative. Okay, let's see another one. Is there any threat in your area regarding locust infiltration now occurring in East Africa? Do you know how such can be handled? Okay, first of all, we do not have a threat currently of locusts, but we had an armyworm which attacked cornfields of people, especially I think in the first planting, because now people can plant up to 4 times because of long dry spells. Things get burnt and then people plant again and again and again. But to respond to locusts, they haven't really come our way. And do you know how such infiltration can be handled? This reminds me when you're looking at a biological ecosystem. The reason why we spray locusts is because we tend to take actions to address a symptom that we are looking at immediately in front of our eyes. So the problem is we have a problem of locusts and we have to get rid of the locust. But let's think back on what's the life cycle of a locust. For example, if you're thinking in wholes instead of parts, Because the reason why you're addressing just the flying locust is it's irritating you, it's eating your crop and eating your vegetables. But what is the life cycle? If you think of it as a whole being, it's the system where it flourishes and grows. Where is it weakest? Where does it thrive, for example? So they are called desert locusts. They thrive in bare patches where they lay their eggs, and I think the heat is sufficient for those eggs to then multiply and become what? Locusts that you then see in your eyes. So what if we addressed the root cause or the place where this locust is at its weakest? So now you're looking at the biological cycle of this animal, which is a locust. So I would say, with my small knowledge of holistic management, I would say healing the rangelands in East Africa will then make the environment not conducive for the eggs to thrive. And then you have attacked it at the beginning, then you do not have to keep treating the symptoms of locusts. An example of bilharzia, for example, if your water is affected with bilharzia, you can choose to keep taking the pills or keep treating the water, but you can also choose to look at the source. Where are the eggs being produced? How long will it take before the eggs get into my tank? And the distance between the eggs and my tank, how long do they have of a lifespan to last before they enter into my tank? Maybe you can kill the eggs in between your source and your tank if you don't open your tank every 24 hours, who knows? And then you stop the bilharzia, and then you don't have to keep taking medications, and you don't have to keep putting pesticides in your pesticides or whatever sides in your water. So that's a brief way of probably approaching it. We need to take time. It will take time for us to know how to control the desert locusts. But then that which takes time, you have given it a broader thought and you've studied the cycle of this thing that you're dealing with. It's like when you're doing holistic grazing, you realize that most farmers, they have really reduced, who are doing holistic grazing, they've reduced on treating their animals, dipping them from tick-borne diseases, because when you do holistic plant grazing, you're also planning for complexity. An example, here in Africa, we have February, January, mid-January to end of February. It's our highest time of rainfall in my region here. It's hottest and you have lots of moisture. And there's a particular tick that thrives at that time. It causes a disease called heartwater or thalariosis. Don't worry, it's a scientific word, so it's difficult for me to say. And we know that we do not have to go to certain areas, low-lying valley-like areas with beautiful grass, looks good to the eyes, but when you take your animals there, they will all die. So you don't go there. You either go there before the peak of the rains or go there after the rains. So April, May, you will visit that portion of land because the strength of that tick at that time is out of the way. Then you save your animals from death and heavy tick loads. Is that helpful?
Could I just ask a follow-up question? So are there people in Kenya doing work on the locusts, trying to do the holistic land management now? Because
yes,
these people are really going through hell. It is terrible what's happening to their crops.
They are. I have a group, Northern Rangelands Trust. The Northern Rangelands Trust are doing both holistic grazing and actual seeding of grass seeds. So they looked at their context and discussing how they can reverse this, and they had some funds. Probably in Zimbabwe that wouldn't have worked, because how do you seed thousands and thousands of hectares? But then they were using community-based resources and people to say, guys, this is your land, go and spread these seeds. They're just trying as much as they can to grow grass. This is the Northern Rangelands Trust, Gravis Zebra, working with conservancies. And then you have the Mara side, there is a Savory hub that is also spreading information on holistic management. But the actual effort that I've seen and witnessed was in the north.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So I don't think I have any other question for now. Let's go to a bit of the slides. I really liked this conversation. I think it was certain questions.
Precious, I'm sorry. I did put a question in the chat. What I wanted to know was how, when you go into a new region, are you fairly confident as to how to use your herd grazing in that area? I'm sure it's variable from one region to another. Is that correct?
Sorry, just go again. It was bumpy.
Now, as far as the regenerative herd grazing goes, it's variable from one region to another how you do it, right?
Yes.
I've read Alan's book. Do you actually, when you go into a new region, is it kind of experimentation, or how systematic is your approach to different topography, different rainfall, different soil types? Is that just based on past experience, or is it how do you know how to graze in that area?
Okay, I think that's a nice question. It actually really sort of almost asks how different is regenerative agriculture or regenerative grazing or holistic grazing from the rest of other grazing practices. Because again, I'll go back to reductionist and mechanistic or whole systems. When I come to any area, there are about four insights that we need to understand. But I think as far as grazing is concerned, we are probably thinking about one or two. So the four key insights of holistic management is, first, we look at wholes. So we do not study things in parts, or we do not manage in parts, but we understand that all the dots are connected, and what I do here will affect the next one. And if my family is the first whole, what is the next whole? Maybe the next whole are plants, the next whole is the soil, the next whole is this and this, or things under the soil, for example. So that's one. Two, we have what we call the brittleness scale, which, brittle. Brittle, should I type it?
No, I know what it is, yeah.
Cool, okay, great. No, I thought maybe my pronunciation was messing things up. the accents.
I read Alan's book.
So we have what we call the brittleness. Okay, that's all right. So maybe for the benefit of others, let me just go through it quickly.
Sure.
Brittleness scale, which is talking about the amount, the availability of precipitation in the stretch of a year. My environment where I am is very brittle. So when grass is dry or plants dry, you actually break them like this and you hear pa, because it's dry and there's no moisture at all. So you have maybe 4 months of frequent moisture and then 8 months in a year of total dry. So the biological systems that are effective in plants at that time are also different. And then you have non-brittle environments, which have a better spread of moisture, regardless of the amount, but the availability of moisture and probably in relation to the warmth, it means there is some sort of growth, even if we do not have rainfall or large amounts of rainfall. So you can have 1,000, I don't know what that translates to in inches. Let's just say you can have 25 inches of rainfall within 4 months and then be dry for the rest of the year. You are brittle because it's confined. The rest of the time you have no moisture and no growth. And then you can have a 15-inch area, a 15-inch rainfall, but it is well spread over the year. Maybe they have just 2 months or 3 months of dry. They are non-brittle. They have a better chance of growing more frequently than you with big bigger rainfall amounts, but short space of moisture. Is that good?
That's good. I just
That's
want to
brittle.
know how you vary your grazing habits
Yes,
in a
I
brittle
have
versus a non-brittle environment.
I have to explain it from that angle because, so I'll probably stick it to that, the brittleness scale, because that's what then determines your recovery periods. So recovery periods, when you're planning grazing, especially in the growing season, please note I said growing season and not rainfall season or precipitation season, because you're not only aiming at how much water did I get, but what is also happening to my plants while I am exposing them to animals. So in the growing season, if you are in a non-brittle environment, for example, you can return your animals to graze again your plants in a shorter space of time. But in brittle environments like ours, because we have, okay, of course we have moisture, but then we have too long before another rain actually comes. We do not return to plants in the growing season until 90 days. In the Mara, for example, in Kenya, still in Africa, they return in 45 days. That means their growth is rapid because they have rapid moisture, good weather, and so their plants, when you've grazed the plants, they have root systems that work and they grow back up again and you can return quickly. So the time that you spend, your animals spend on each plant in each region will be different. It cannot be uniform. Here we have 90 days recovery. In other places it's 30, other places it's 60.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And that's an important question. So it shows you that it's not a one size fits all. You have to intricately know how your ecosystem processes are working, energy flow, and how much cover you actually also have.
Uh-huh. Okay, thanks again.
So once, if you use if you create a landscape that retains water better, then it allows you to change those practices based on those regenerative. So if you have an environment that was brittle when you had 90 days regrazing, if you build up the infrastructure, you build the soil with the grazing, that you're capable of changing that.
Yes, you're capable of changing carrying capacity, you're capable of changing the size of land that you need vis-a-vis the number of animals that you have. I have a commercial farmer, I think they're in Washington, Cheney, Washington. They used holistic plant grazing. They used to have a leased land, and then they started using holistic plant grazing. They literally let go of the lease of that land, but still kept the same amount of animals. So that means you've changed your carrying capacity rapidly by just changing or sort of influencing the community dynamics and the types of grasses and plants that you desire by your management choices. It's not the same. The carrying capacity will not remain the same every year. That's exactly it.
So, so you're saying that during the dry spell in some areas you need to not allow grazing during that time? Is that right? And so where do the animals graze?
Okay, I said the amount of time that the animals will take before they go back to the grass plants. You do allow grazing, but you have to measure your forage. If it's in the dry season, now you include measurement of the forage before the non-growing season starts. Why do you measure before the non-growing season? You want to also manage risk. Because what if you lose all your animals? You don't have enough forage. So you better sell, store away the money, and then buy as you grow enough forage. Or if you have money to lease more land, then you are safer than keep growing with large numbers of animals. When your forage is reporting that this is a non-growing season, you won't be growing any, and you do not have enough to carry you through the 8 months.
So you're saying in a brittle environment, you need to have more land per animal?
Sometimes yes, mostly yes. And that's why you will notice that even in northern Kenya, their rangelands are vast. In Africa, most of Africa has large grazelands, large grazing lands, because the dynamics are really steep, especially for non-commercial farmers.
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
I asked you this earlier. I'm asking you about the relationship of the holistic philosophy, really, that comes out of your practice, and with relationship not just to sort of local subsistence farming, but with a larger supply of food that, say, goes to cities. So I'm wondering what your experience has been with this, working with holistic farming in a local region, and its part it plays in any kind of larger systemic food system. In other words, for example, to more urban areas or whatever. Did you have any experience with that? Because those of us in the Northeast United States, most of our concern with all this has to do with very, very vulnerable urban areas that depend enormously on the relatively small areas of land that are within 5, 10, 50 miles, 100 miles. And beyond that, it becomes very expensive and so on. And this is what makes cities so vulnerable. Inside of 3 days, they start to starve. Okay?
Right.
I'm just
Right.
And so I'm just wondering what your experience has been with this, because this would, here we are in the so-called first world asking you for our advice, because I feel like you really have learned a lot that we need to know. Go ahead.
Okay, so I like that. So first of all, thank you so much for thinking that I've learned a lot, and I'm also learning here talking to you guys. And I imagine that we're from really diverse and different backgrounds. I don't have a direct experience with holistic management farmers in rural communities actually being involved in massive trade, a little bit of it, because with some of our produce, we've done it to trade with hotels and cities, and it's really close range.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the holistic management movement is concerned, we have the land to marketing, which is a model that is using exactly what you're talking about, which is clusters of farmers within certain localities trading directly with their cities with verified products that are verified land to market, that are verified ecologically beneficial to the soil. But I think more than just farmers organizing themselves, what will actually help our world at the moment, world over, is having policies that will support this kind of question that you are saying. Because once governmental policies understand that agriculture must be regionally relevant. In the United States, things are different from state to state and city to city. But if we spell out as a country what kind of environment, if you have a Ministry of Agriculture, if they can spell out what kind of agriculture do we want to support and vie for, and all that spelling out local patches, where I know my farmer, where I know my rancher, where I know this, and then the policies usually align to that. But then you find that sometimes farmers get stuck because, yes, we're doing holistic grazing, but then there are certain policies that do not allow your grass to grow to this level, that do not allow cats in this. I heard lots of things when I came to the US. You're not supposed to have a cat on the farm. You're not supposed to have, so all those laws, they tend to really undermine the potential of farmers within an area supporting their nearest city. Yeah, so I think that's how I would really spell it out, to say, I think that's why Green Revolution ended up going world over as a template, to say this is how you plant maize, and you plant it the same way in a heavy rainfall and a less rainfall area. And then the guy in the less rainfall, they face severe drought. but elsewhere it's working. Same with how we are addressing the COVID-19. In Zimbabwe, they say lockdown, but then we don't have the next meal. How do I lock down without the next meal? Maybe in the US, you can lock down because yes, you can buy a few groceries and you have them. But then here, we don't have the very next meal. But what do governments do? They copy and paste. Lock down, everyone, you're not going out. This, you're not going out. But then what if we looked at what would work in Africa to flatten the curve, to keep people fed and keep everyone safe? It would probably be different than lockdown. Because right now, lockdown is not working.
You know, it just, you're saying that, to me, you're saying that what I suspected, which is that your focus and all this really incredible work that's being done is very highly localized. That is much closer to the notion of blessed unrest because it percolates up from the roots, okay, from local regions. What you're talking about is the need to go sort of beyond that level of blessed unrest into policy. When that's the gap that is huge here. And
if we do not address the policy gap, here's what I've been thinking about. Regeneration will end up in the same street as Green Revolution because there is no bigger voice in the global leadership to actually enhance or enable or refocus farmers to think, let's not contribute to desertification, let's not contribute to climate change. It becomes cute little pockets all over that cannot be exponential in terms of impact if policy doesn't chip in. That's how I feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we all hope that blessed unrest gets translated into political action. That's what we hope. But we just it's a huge gap at this point.
Yes.
Precious, are you familiar with the work of Joel Salatin in western part of Virginia? Because that's exactly his message as well. That he wrote a book called something like Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. And it's about farming and all of his policies, all the things he does on his farm that's illegal. And he's always having hassles over and over again with the officials because the policies don't fit an ecological way of doing farming. It's a great book.
It's
Wendell Berry also.
But it's because I think money is running the whole system.
Exactly. Right.
We haven't asked ourselves, where is this money coming from? Right. Is this true wealth? Is it coming from photosynthesis? If it's coming from fossil fuels and tourism industry and stock markets, everything is grounded right now. The only consistent supply of wealth, the sun remains functioning. Our green plants remain converting energy.
Right.
Bravo.
So what exactly are we, what is the money, the source of it, and how sustainable is it? How far can it carry us into the future?
Right.
I think those are important questions without even putting the word holistic management or regeneration.
Right.
Just that change of shift in how we view where our finances are coming from, the money, the energy, and the source and the use of it.
Right.
Hey, Precious. This is Jim Laurie. I want to connect a few dots for some of the folks from America here. You're living in an area that I think gets about 10 inches of rain a year at the most, which is, let's see, that's 50 centimeters or whatever, something like that.
That's it's 25 centimeters.
25 cent. Okay, so 10 inches. That's right. 10 inches of rain is 25 centimeters. Is that about what you're seeing out there?
So 25 centimeters per what?
Per
That's
year.
250 millimeters. So we measure it.
250 millimeters, right? Yeah.
Great, exactly. So that's like probably our region 4 and 5.
So 10 inches of rain. 10 inches of rain in our country is way out beyond the 100th meridian, and that's where we've taken the animals and shipped them off to feedlots. So we're trying to grow grain in places that are very dry, and then we put our animals in prison.
Yeah.
which are not grain eaters, but they're grass eaters. And that's where we've got to bind. We're watching our soil wash away because there's no animals on the land. There's no grasslands where there used to be. And
For us, our regions that have that amount of rain, this is where you have the wildlife.
Yeah, exactly.
You have all the cattle ranches with animals on the land.
This is
working in the ecosystem as a tool, as a biological tool to keep it alive.
So we're trying to grow grain all over the country to feed animals in feedlots, and most of them are not adapted to eat grain anyway. They want to eat grass.
Yeah.
And yet we're watching our grasslands disappear because the soil's being washed away because there's no deep grass.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And so here Precious is in a brittle environment in Zimbabwe, and she's having more success than most of our American farmers where they have lots of subsidies and so forth. And that's where we're in a bind.
I think, Jim, the transformation also will take a while.
Oh, it might, yeah.
There's lots of knowledge that has gone to farmers that this is the best way to farm. And so now we're having a lot of unlearning to do. And I think, I don't know about you guys, but I think all of us have had a fair share of unlearning. A fair share of, oh, okay, oh, really? Okay, that doesn't work. And, oh, okay, that doesn't work. And unplugging things off your head. Because half the time you think, oh, I know, if I put this manure here and at this time and plant this is how it will grow. Well, no. It will grow according to how the land sees fit. So you continue to learn, because every time your land self-organizes, if you do it the same way, if you lose a member in an organization, you immediately all fill up the gaps and you keep going. If someone else leaves, you keep going. If someone else leaves, you keep going. That's the same way with our own environment. It self-organizes. It's Alan always uses this word complex and complicated. I think we have taken everything to be complicated and not complex. I'll give some definitions there. Everything that we make, my phone, my computer, very complicated. If you don't know how to use it, oh, you're in trouble. But like the person who made this computer knew that I would need it for a Zoom call, and they put a camera on it. And then once you're connected on Wi-Fi, this computer is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. In Zimbabwe, we have very poor internet. Again, here we are talking at this very moment. Yeah. It's complicated. We made it. Unless you have a skill and expertise to do it, you cannot use it. But it's totally usable. If it has a problem, someone can fix it immediately, and it should respond the way it's supposed to respond. And then complex, it's things that we do not make. A human body, a family, nature, all those things, anything that we do not make, that naturally occurs. You cannot manipulate it, except you can manage it, make decisions on it, and it keeps giving you feedback. Sometimes you have what we call unintended consequences and intended consequences. So you have to keep learning. You cannot be superior, or you cannot predetermine what will be the outcome. Though you have your experiences and certain principles, but you keep a close eye. So that's why every time when you're planning holistic grazing, always assume you are wrong. With nature, when you're planning, assume you are wrong. That will help you to keep your eye and monitoring robust. So you plan, assume you are wrong, monitor, control. If things get way too out of hand, replan. But then with humans, if you assume the negative about them, there's what we call self-fulfilling prophecy, because then you treat them according to how you perceive. But with humans, always assume the best about them. Then you give them a better chance. Little things I've learned. So yeah.
I think they say it, allowing somebody to live up to their potential. The best expectation you have of somebody, hopefully they'll live up to your expectation.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we're on 8:29. I think we're almost, but I enjoyed this conversation. Any thoughts, any feedbacks, anyone who wants to share anything in the next 5 or 10 minutes?
Can I ask my one question? I've seen many videos with Alan Savory talking about through his professional life that he would show successes of the regenerative agriculture, but he was still banned from presenting these ideas or making it widespread throughout Africa. And I'm wondering, do you find over time that is do you run into resistance from people? It seems like such common sense to go through the regenerative agriculture. And do you find acceptance where you go?
So there are times when things collide, and then there are times when people accept. I think there are a few, I'm looking for the word, a few variables that will determine acceptance or inacceptance. Sometimes I think the major challenges that Alan has had in his work is in academia, because I think scientists have worked so hard, even if it was reductionist, in creating these theories and philosophies, and it's difficult to let go if someone has a new thought. It's like a paradigm shift, which is always threatening. Secondly, it can be the language of how you share the few discoveries that you've made. That can impact. Thirdly is egos. I guess it goes back to academia. The knowledge that I've piled in, now to unlearn, that's what blocks the knowledge. Kids would take it much better. We have, I have a few of my friends, one of them is Alan's daughter, and other 2 colleagues. We are trying it out, a school's holistic management curriculum. They get it immediately, like they are innocent souls, they haven't piled information in them, and so they easily take in and say, oh, that makes sense, that's too easy, that's really easy. So sometimes for people who have spent their lives having their PhDs, they'll just say it doesn't work, even if they've come to the center and seen that everywhere else it's dry, the center has a flowing spring, they'll still say it does not work. It's such a blockade that you can't do anything about sometimes. Sometimes you keep pushing. Sometimes you have a few scientists who have come on board. That's why we have AMP grazing. I don't know if you've heard about it. Adaptive multi-paddocking.
What is it?
AMP, A-M-P. A-M-P.
Wow.
Yeah, AMP grazing. So adaptive multi-paddock grazing scheme. Do you know what that is? That is holistic grazing planning. But then when someone wrote that, there's a guy, Dr. Will Allen, Richard Teague, Professor Richard Teague, when they wrote papers and actually spelled out holistic plant grazing, they were not accepted. But when they changed the name to multi-paddocking system, their papers were peer reviewable and correct. And the book, Holistic Management book by Alan Savory, is the first author. They cannot take it. The Holistic Management Handbook is by Jody Butterfield. It's accepted in science and colleges. But then the one that has Alan Savory as first author is not accepted. So it's really, it's a whole disaster.
Okay, thank you.
But we've seen millions of acres that have come back by using these kind of processes.
Yeah.
Assuming you're wrong, but keep learning as you go. So
I think so. Like, the idea is to really keep going. Though sometimes what I find is the challenge is if you really want to knock on the big fundings, when you want to create like big partnerships, especially for the African rangelands, we have so much potential to have big grants, but then they do not serve the immediate gratification, or, you know, regenerative is both the people, the land, and their society. There are lots of variables to monitor that this is changing. Women are getting in leadership. The men are getting leadership. This, you have lots of things to measure. But then most of these big grants want to tick off checklists and then say, this is done, this is done. So they cannot support work like Alan's work. because they would say, oh no, like this scientist doesn't agree with this, this scientist doesn't agree with this. So that's where the downfall becomes. But imagine if it was taken by a bigger voice or a big organization or a big donor organization, if they started, if just one lobbied for it and gave it a try at a massive scale, it would make a big difference. Okay, I think there's one message. Oh, thank you, Eric.
Okay, I'm signing off. Bye now. We appreciate your help. I love this afternoon. I love today. You are right on message and I'm loving it. Bye now.
Oh, I really enjoyed also. This was really nice. And it was nice that we didn't get to the PowerPoint part, because then we really spoke what was in our hearts. And thank you so much.
We'll get you next time. Thank you.
Yes. Nancy,
Yes.
I will, I've gotten your thing, your address.
Okay, thank you so much, Precious.
Okay.
This was a wonderful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed myself too.
Good luck with all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Precious. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot.
Very informative, Precious.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Amandla. Amandla.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, cheers.